What sustainability innovation are you most excited about? Do you think presents the biggest opportunity?
The thing I really am enjoying about this is there is more talk of collaboration than I've ever heard. So no one is going to be able to do this on their own. What you need is companies to step beyond that competitive agenda and start to really reach out to other companies. And I'm starting to see that, and that gives me hope that we will get there in the end.
Excellent. What do you see as the biggest challenge in building a more sustainable future?
I think the way you build a properly sustainable future is if you think about the ESG framework, which lots of companies think about these days, you have to get the environmental side, and the social side working in perfect harmony. If you don't, then what happens is you might invest in an environmentally productive project, but you ignore human rights. You need the two things to work together, and that's how we get trade which works for people and planet.
So we're giving out money here. If you had $100 billion US, what would you spend it on to advance our global goals and why?
Well, $100 billion would be a nice start, right? But Fairtrade is all about working with farmers in the global south, helping them get a better deal out of global trade. Farmers in the global south, typically smallholders, they are not the guys who have been responsible for the climate crisis in the first place, but they're on the sharp end of all of this. So they're trying still to adapt and mitigate on their farms while growing products that we all enjoy every day, but they're not paid enough. One of the things that was really good in COP was the commitment to a climate fund for developing countries, to be able to invest and adapt in their own countries. That hasn't come yet, so that's the first place that 100 billion should go. Straight to the farmers, not to governments, to farmers, to help them mitigate against the climate crisis.
Excellent. And what about policy? If you could implement a policy that would help us achieve global sustainability and climate goals, what would that policy be and why?
I would tackle competition policy. So competition law has for too long been risk averse, and it stops people talking about price. We need to talk about the cost of sustainable production. We need to talk about long-term low prices in food. That means farmers don't get enough to be able to look after their farms, care for their families, and mitigate against the climate crisis. But also it means that companies can't share their best practice on how they can collaborate together. So we need a competition policy framework put into competition law in the UK, which allows for pre-competitive collaboration, talking about price, so the cost of sustainable production can be baked in to supply chains.
What are some of the key outcomes you would like to see come out of COP28?
Bigger and better and faster commitment to loss and damage.
How can the recent momentum on global action on biodiversity be sustained?
Well, again, thinking about Fairtrade is all about good farming and sustainable farming, and there you need to bring a commitment to biodiversity into food systems. So monoculture is anti-developmental. Monoculture, where we see huge plantations growing a single crop for years and years, depletes the soil and kills biodiversity. Fairtrade is mostly working with small-scale farmers, and when they are funded well enough, as they are with Fairtrade, to be able to invest in their farms, they can invest in biodiversity, and you see these wonderful ecosystems developing. Shade trees and the kind of flora and fauna you will get on a farm in Fairtrade is significantly better than you would get in monoculture.
So everyone recognizes the Fairtrade label now. How effective are carbon or sustainability labels in your view?
It's a crowded ethical market, and there are some schemes which are better than others, I would say. Fairtrade tries very hard not to overclaim. The key thing here is you need to be able to walk the talk. So if you're making a claim that you can certify against this standard, whether it's an environmental or social standard, you have to be able to demonstrate the benefit. So at Fairtrade we work with a team of auditors around the world who check compliance against the standards, but then we have a team of on-the-ground experts, agronomists and local extension workers who work with the farmers around the world in 75 countries to help them get the best out of their certification. So you start to get this kind of feedback loop of, I'm compliant here, but I'm a little bit weak on this. I've had on-the-ground help to help me get better. That starts to create a virtuous circle on the farms, which is brilliant.
How might labels incentivize businesses to reduce their carbon footprints and biodiversity loss?
Fairtrade began as a public campaign. We're nearly 30 years old, but it was the public that made Fairtrade what it is now. And it was the public asking companies to be able to demonstrate whether they were making any difference in their supply chains. So I think consumer engagement is a really important part of this. So the job there is for companies to be able to tell an honest story to the public before the public finds them out. Don't overclaim, but don't be afraid to talk about the challenges. And eventually that might also sensitize the public to start thinking about what price good food, what price good products rather than exploitative products.
Yeah, and that point about sort of consumer education, how can companies engage meaningfully with their customers to help to drive that education and then more sustainable consumer choices?
Be honest, tell the whole story. What we do in Fairtrade is to try to to show the challenge. So there are very big challenges in trying to run globally, environmentally and socially sustainable supply chains. Tell the big story, but then give people hope. So you can't solve everything, but as a consumer, you can start to choose where you shop, how you shop, and when enough of us do that together, it makes a massive difference.
And so what role do you see these play in the context of growing concerns around greenwashing?
It's all about authenticity. So companies voluntarily should be trying not to overclaim, and if they do overclaim, they need to be held account by the regulators, because what we can't have is public cynicism, that sustainability claims of any kind are not working. The best ones, like Fairtrade, really are, and the laggards need to be held to account.
So there's a lot of talk over the next couple of days, of course, about technology and innovation, climate tech. Are there any sort of specific tech and innovations that you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, there are lots. So we're starting to work with nanotechnology. We're starting to work with geolocation mapping of farms. So if you're buying Fairtrade certified cocoa, you can check where they come from in terms of the provenance from particular smallholder groups. And we're also working with mobile phone technology, so we can have a sort of feedback loop with farmers and workers, the people at the very first mile of these very long global supply chains, which gives us a really rich and immediate sense of how they're doing, what's going on, what the impact is. I would put a challenge in there, which is tech is fantastic, but you need humans to interpret it. Right? And another part of this is, and we hear this from the farmers directly in Fairtrade, which is that tech can't just provide information for the big players in global supply chains. It isn't just about the end buyer managing his or her risks. Right? The tech of what's happening on a farm belongs to the cocoa farmer or the banana farmer, and they want to be able to have a say in how it's used. And I think that sort of speaks to their human rights as well. So tech plus humanity is the way forward.
Excellent. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.